EU citizen and thinking of moving to the Czech Republic or living here for a bit longer than 3 months, then this video is exactly for you, because I will be talking about the registration certificate as well, or which you can get as an EU citizen living in the Czech Republic. You might have heard also the term of temporary residence certificate or temporary residency, whatever. It all refers to the same thing. It just used to be named temporary registration certificate or temporary residence certificate. Now it's registration certificate, so it's just a bit different name for the same thing. So what we'll cover today is basically everything related to that. So what the registration certificate is, who should think about getting it or where it's actually needed to get it, maybe some prediction for the next year as well. And then we'll go through the documents and how to apply, the most common reasons for denials, all these kind of details. That's what we'll cover. So stick with me. If you have any questions regarding the topic, ask them in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them. If you have different questions which are not related to the topic, then I'll be happy to answer them as well, but only in the next live stream, which will be right after this one, but only in the joiners section. So let's go. What is the registration certificate? EU citizens do not need any visa or residence permit to live in the Czech Republic. But if you plan on living here for a longer period of time, it might be very useful to have some confirmation that you officially reside in the Czech Republic. And I will get back to the reasons why you would need that. But the registration certificate is basically exactly this. So it's this kind of piece of paper. It literally looks like this, almost the same quality of the paper. So like something they print out on their own printer there at the ministry. On one side that says the name of the document, and here is your data, like date of birth, full name, passport number, and your address. Basically, there is not even your photo. So it's nothing too official, but you might need it in some situations. As of now, obtaining the registration certificate is not mandatory. The only mandatory thing is going to the foreign police within your first 30 days after arrival to the Czech Republic as an EU citizen. The registration certificate is not mandatory, but it might be useful in some cases. So one of the most common cases for our clients to get the registration certificate is tax-related issues. Typically, we have now one client from Germany who is moving to the Czech Republic, and we're timing it the way that he will become a Czech tax resident as soon as possible. And one of the documents he needs for that is the registration certificate, or that will help is the registration certificate. So if you're moving here to save on taxes and you want to become a Czech tax resident, this might be the perfect document to get. Also, this officially proves that you reside in the Czech Republic. So if, for example, your Italian authorities or Spanish authorities, Dutch authorities, German authorities, whatever, want to see that you no longer live in that country, then having this registration certificate officially issued document by Czech government saying that you live here will help a lot. So that's one very important reason, and actually the most common among our clients. Then others are more related to like your everyday life. That's why I said in the beginning that it's definitely worth it if you plan on staying here for more than 3 months. If it's just like a short-term visit, 3 months, 2 months, 5 months, doesn't really matter. But if you want to settle down here and you want to, for example, get a local car and get the car, or have your own car brought here and get it registered in the Czech Republic so you can get parking spots, all that, you need the registration certificate for that. In some cases, it's needed for your kids to be accepted to a school or kindergarten, because you need to prove that you live in that particular part of Prague or Brno or wherever, so they can accept your kids into the school. It's also definitely needed if you're bringing a non-EU spouse. So let's say you're an EU citizen, but your spouse or partner for the partnership visa are non-EU citizens, then you definitely need to get the registration certificate as well, because they will be moving here and applying for a residence permit, a partnership visa or the temporary residence permit, as someone who wants to live with you. But if there is no record of you living here, that would be more difficult to get the other one approved as well. So that's one important situation as well, where we get the registration certificate for our clients. Then some banks or some other, maybe for utilities registrations, for opening a bank account, not that much, but some banks might still require that. Definitely for getting a mortgage or a similar, maybe getting a loan or stuff like that. Usually those organizations like banks, they want to see that you actually reside in the Czech Republic, and lease agreement, or especially if it's a short-term lease that you move often or something, it might not suffice. And two more important points why is one, getting rodné číslo, birth number, because that's often what happens as well, that EU citizens contact us, hey, my employer told me I need to get a birth number, or someone else told me I need to get birth number. And the easiest way to get it is through the registration certificate, because when you apply for the registration certificate, the ministry should issue the rodné číslo as well. I'm not saying they always do that, they don't, and sometimes it takes a very long time to get it, but they start working on that. If you keep it in mind and you give them all the information they need, then they start working on that and you will get the rodné číslo at some point. If you want to get rodné číslo without applying for the registration certificate, it's technically possible as well, but it requires way more work from your side. Because you, for example, need to have a birth certificate from the country of origin with all the legalizations that needs, so apostille, super legalization, translate it into Czech, originals, all that, and it might be difficult to get if you're already here. So through the registration certificate, that's also one of the easiest ways of getting rodné číslo. Last but not least, if you plan on applying for a permanent residence permit after 5 years of living here, or potentially citizenship, it will be way easier if you have the registration certificate, because you can technically apply for permanent residency after 5 years of living here. But if you don't have the registration certificate, you can still do it, but you will have to prove that you have really been living here the whole 5 years, which means providing all your employment contracts, ideally no gaps in between those, lease agreements, again, no gaps in between those. And then the ministry still might be like, that you had a lease agreement does not mean that you lived here. We've seen that happen in even like stupid things, that in the employment contract, it was before Brexit, so that person had a British address in his employment contract, and the ministry denied or made trouble with the permanent residence application, saying that he had a British address in the contract, so that probably means he wasn't here the whole time. And if you have the registration certificate, that makes it easier, because you have an official proof that you've been living here the whole time. So that helps. So to sum it up, maybe if you, as an EU citizen, you don't have to apply for the registration certificate. The only thing you officially have to do is go to the foreign police within the first 30 days. But if you plan on staying longer, and especially if you plan on bringing your spouse or partner from non-EU country, if you plan on buying a property here, you getting a mortgage, register on a car, getting your kid registered in school and similar stuff, definitely worth doing it as well. And then also, ideally, if you need to prove to someone or to some authority that you officially reside in the Czech Republic, be it for tax reasons or be it for other reasons, then the registration certificate is definitely recommended as well. And definitely, if you see yourself living in the Czech Republic for 10 years and potentially getting the permanent residency or citizenship, that will make your life easier as well. Now, step-by-step process on how to get it done. Abdul Rahouf, hi, thank you for joining. Guys, if you have any questions about the registration certificate for EU citizens, ask them in the chat. I will be happy to answer them. If you have other questions, then I will be following this live stream with another live stream, but that will be only for joiners, for paid members of the community. And you can ask me anything there. I will be answering whatever questions you might have, even if they're not topical to the registration certificate. So now, how to get the registration certificate? It is relatively straightforward. So even though we provide it as a service, I'm not saying that you have to use a service, but obviously that has some advantages, especially if the registration certificate is needed for some specific reason, like the tax reasons, or registering the car which you have just bought, or you found an apartment and your bank told you that you need to get the registration certificate to get a mortgage, and otherwise you will lose the flat. So if there is some like time pressure, I would definitely recommend hiring someone to help you with that. Obviously, the best choice is us, move to Prague. But if you hire someone else who is experienced, do that as well, that's fine. But it's always better to hire someone and make sure that the application is submitted properly and with no mistakes, and you get it approved, you get it done swiftly, so you can actually do what you plan on doing, rather than trying to do it on yourself and then ended up losing your apartment because you didn't provide that document in time for the mortgage, or not being able to register a car and use a car which you've bought for months on, or in the worst case, maybe losing a lot of money paying taxes somewhere where you don't want to pay taxes anymore. So if you don't have anything to lose, so if you're getting the registration certificate just because you want it, but not because you need it for some official purpose, then do it yourself if you want to. Try to submit it. I'll give you all the documents you need and all the details. But if you want to make sure that it goes smoothly and it's approved in time, then I definitely recommend using the service. So now, what documents are needed? You need an application form filled in. Simple. Passport or national ID, meaning like EU ID. So you don't need to have a passport if you're a German or Dutch or whatever. You can just have like a Dutch ID or a German ID. That's fine. You need to get a passport size photo. Don't use the photo booths in metro stations. Go to some proper photo studio and get like proper photos taken, because usually the ministry does not like the photo booths ones. Proof of accommodation. I will get back to it because that's where most people make some mistakes, and I will get to the mistakes in a couple of minutes or seconds. But you need to have a proof that you have somewhere to live in the Czech Republic. So either a lease agreement or proof of recommendation, proof of accommodation from your landlord, potentially some other documents as well. Then you need to have some purpose of stay. So if you moved here for employment, then you submit the employment contract. If you move here for self-employment, for business, you submit your trade license or the limited liability company registration, and you can use that. If you don't have any official purpose to live here, because you don't have to, you can move here just like being retired or like just not doing anything. You just check in the application form that your purpose of stay is other, and that's enough. The only thing there is that if you check that the purpose is other, you need to provide also a proof of having health insurance, which can potentially be your European health insurance card, the EHIC card, if you have the blue one. If you don't have that, you would need to get a local Czech insurance. But other than that, so it's easier to use your employment contract or the trade license, because the Czech health insurance goes automatically with that, so you don't need to prove it to the ministry. But even if you check the other, it's still perfectly doable. And then admin fee, that's 200 crowns. Used to be paid in stamps until 1st of January this year, but now the ministry accepts money actually, so you can pay by card at the Ministry of the Interior. Or potentially if you're mailing the application in, you have to pay it in advance via bank transfer. One thing to mention here is that, or a couple things, that all the documents must be originals, which means not simple copies, not scans, nothing like that. And it must be in Czech, which usually is not a problem. But if your landlord, for example, wanted to do you good and write your accommodation contract or a lease agreement in English so you understand it, great for you, but it will not work for the Ministry of the Interior. If it's in both languages, Czech and English, yes, that's fine, but keep in mind it must be either an original or an official copy, like a notarized copy done by a notary or a lawyer or a checkpoint, post office, wherever, but not just a simple copy. So obviously don't give them the original because you're not getting it back, so make copies. Then you basically, when you have all the documents ready, you have to submit them to the Ministry of the Interior. And there are basically two ways to do that. One is to go there in person and one is to mail it to the Ministry of the Interior. Don't try to do it through the data box because that's the most stupid thing you can do. It will take forever and very likely that will not work out because you don't have a data box anyway. So you could try, but especially if you need it quickly, I don't recommend it. You can go in person. For that, you definitely need to book an appointment unless you want to wait at the ministry for a couple hours. But then you go in person, and if you get lucky, that's you probably don't get lucky at the Ministry of the Interior, but if you're lucky at the Ministry of the Interior and the person who's dealing with you at the counter is an experienced officer, like a senior officer there, they could potentially approve the registration certificate on the spot and you could get it the same day. It happens like in 10% of cases, so don't count with that. It's not like a standard thing they do, but potentially they could. If you have everything perfectly prepared and you meet a person who's a senior officer there, then it could happen. If that does not happen, then they have 30 days to make the decision, and then you have to go back to the Ministry of the Interior and collect the actual registration certificate, which I showed you before, which is this guy. Document. We generally prefer mailing it to the ministry because if we don't have to go there, we don't go there because there all the branches are like far away and some of the branches are not really nice to go to in terms of the people like dealing with you there, how like rude they are, all that. Even for us, like working in the field for 13 years and speaking Czech fluently, knowing the immigration law inside out, it's still very unpleasant at some branches. I will not name any, but the Chodov one is primarily the one which I mean. So yeah, if we don't have to, we don't go and we mail it to them. If you want to mail it yourself, that's fine as well. You just need to make sure that everything is perfect, which might be also easy to make some mistake because, for example, the application form must be signed. If you forget to sign it, the application will not be complete. You also need to pay the fee in advance. So you need to go to the website of the Ministry of the Interior, generate a QR code, and then pay, and then submit a confirmation of the payment along with the rest of the documents. So if you want to do it on your own, it's a bit more complicated. If you go in person, they could tell you, okay, this is wrong, you can pay here, all that. So it might be a bit easier to do this way. But if you work with us, we prefer mailing it. And then it works the same way. If we mail it, then we regularly check on the case, and once we hear that you've been approved, we book an appointment for you, you go collect it in person, because at least one you should go there in person. So either submit it and then they could potentially mail it to you physically. Also questionable, but it's possible, I've seen it before. Or if you mail the application in, then you have to go in person to collect it. So both options are possible. As I mentioned, or maybe did not mention, the ministry has 30 days to make the decision. Sometimes it's sooner, sometimes not. You still need to book an appointment to go pick it up. So count roughly with a month to get it done. And now the most common mistakes that people make if they try to go through this on their own. Because what usually happens, what happens? Sometimes people contact us and say, hey, I don't want to go through this on my own. I don't have time. I don't want to do it. I don't like bureaucracy, and I don't know what I'm doing anyway because it's everything is in Czech language. I'm new here, so I want to hire a service. So that's sometimes how it works. Sometimes how it works is that people try on their own, and then they come to us saying, yeah, I applied myself, but it's been denied 3 times, and I've spent like 70 hours just traveling back and forth and getting all the documents together. So now I just want you to do that. Both it's fine for us, but if you can avoid losing time, money, and your nerves and your hair, then might be better to just hire us from the beginning and let us take care of it. So if you want to do it on your own, these are the most common mistakes you should ideally avoid. So first, accommodation proof, problems there as the most common reason I've seen for denials of people or complications of people who try to do it on their own. Because the thing is that as an EU citizen, you don't really risk anything when you're moving to an apartment in the Czech Republic, other than like losing money, losing place to live, all that. But you will not get deported if something is incorrect with your apartment. In the worst case, the real landlord will show up a couple weeks in and they will kick you out from the apartment because you got scammed, you didn't check the lease agreement properly. But that's kind of it. It's way worse for non-EU citizens who could potentially be deported. They could face some like significant consequences. So often EU citizens take this lightly, or maybe even like you don't plan on applying for the registration certificate now, so you just don't care much, or you know that there are some problems with your lease agreement, but you kind of ignore it. And then later on, if you buy a car, so like 6 months later, and now you want to get the registration certificate, we tell you that you cannot do it because your apartment does not meet the conditions. And you can either sell the car which you just bought, or you can move apartments. Probably not too many other solutions. So what are the most common problems with lease agreement? One thing is that you don't sign the lease agreement directly with the owners. That's pretty common if there are some middlemen or there are now like maintenance companies or whatever. I don't want to name them because I don't want to get any like legal trouble here. But there are some like famous companies that like are renting or sub-renting, subleasing apartments. They kind of take care of everything for the landlord. But if you're not signing a lease directly with the landlord, you need to prove the connection between the person who signed your lease agreement and the owners. So in some cases that can be just a lease agreement and then you have a sublease agreement. So you need to have these 2 contracts. Sometimes, as for example, in case of these maintenance companies, I've just like mentioned, you need to get like 4 different powers of attorney and 3 different contracts because it's every time it's someone different signing the documents. And I've seen in the beginning, now they are better because we've taught them somehow what we need or what the ministry needs. So they now are more aware of it. But in the beginning, it took us a couple of weeks to get all the documentation from them because, yeah, if you need like 4 different powers of attorney and like 2-3 different contracts, might be a bit complicated. So that's one thing. Also, one important thing is that we have something called družstvo in the Czech Republic, which is a housing cooperative, which means that you deal with a landlord. There is some guy or some lady, and they tell you, we are the owners of the apartment. We'll sign everything for you, whatever. But they're actually not the owners. They're just members of the housing cooperative, which kind of means they will be owners at some point because they're paying the monthly rent as basically they're buying the apartment slowly. That's like a very special type of like ownership in the Czech Republic. But on paper, at this point, they're not the owners. So usually you need to get consent of the whole like housing cooperative saying that you can live in the apartment and that those people can sublease it to you. And again, in some cases that might be pretty easy if everyone's aware of that and they know that, or they agree with people like subleasing their apartments. In some cases might be difficult because usually it's the director of the of the housing cooperative and one more member of the board who need to sign it. And sometimes might be pretty difficult to get both of them to sign the same document in some reasonable time. So družstvo definitely a no-go. Then, or be careful there, no-go, no, but be careful. What also happens very often is that the apartment you live in is actually not really an apartment on paper. Because now, or it's been a couple of years actually, because of the housing crisis, I don't like really calling it this, but like you know what I mean. So landlords become creative. So what they often do is that they, for example, reconstruct the attic space or the cellars, and they make them look like an apartment. And even though there is everything you would expect from an apartment, officially it's not an apartment because it does not meet some requirements for apartment. So for example, in the cellar, usually you have some small windows, so there is not enough light officially. Or in attic spaces, it's like not insulated properly, so the temperatures can be like higher in the summer or lower in the winter. Also not officially considered an apartment. We also have something called atelier, which is like a, let's say, apartment for artists, maybe with big windows and everything. And that might also have some other consequences, like the insulation is not proper. And you can also find this in newly built buildings, because, for example, when they're getting the permission from the city to build, the city says, okay, you must have at least 10% of business spaces, like offices. So they do it, but they do it the way that they build flats, but then they write that 10% of the flats are offices. So then you officially live in an office, even though it looks like an apartment, and that's not uncommon. So you need to be very much careful about this as well. And when there is a problem with the registration certificate, it's usually with the proof of accommodation. Some other, like copies, translations, not signed documents, that's pretty common because everything must be either originals or notarized copies if you just send simple copies, or something that is older than 160 days, 180 days, half a year, 180 days. That will not be accepted by the Ministry of the Interior either. So those are minor things, but can happen. Not paying the 200 crowns, that happens as well. Used to happen in the past where you had to buy the stamps, but that was actually kind of easier because you went to the office, to the post office, bought them and just like stapled it to the application. Now you have to generate the special QR code in advance and pay that. If you don't and you just send the application without that, the ministry will send you a letter requesting the 200 crowns and it will just delay everything. And that's the main things. There can be other things as well, but those are like rare cases. The accommodation is the most common. And I would say that's kind of it because that's a pretty simple topic, but I've been talking about it for 30 minutes. So let's see if we have any questions related to this topic and I'll answer them now. Hi, how apply work visa? Okay, so that's not related to this live stream. Hi, I want job. Phone number, I want job. Understand, wrong talk. Okay, that's good you understood because that's also not a question about this topic. Jalpan full, it's been 100 days, but still my long-term student application shows under process. That's not related to this either. I'm soon to be Slovak citizen. I'm looking to set up my freelance work in the Czech Republic. Thanks for the info. Yeah, so I would do it the way that you first get the trade license, or first get the citizenship, obviously, but then first you get the trade license, and then based on the trade license, you can apply for the registration certificate, because the trade license will make it easier since you will prove the purpose of your stay and you will not have to prove having a local insurance because local insurance automatically goes with the trade license. Happy to help you with both the trade license and or the registration certificate. Get in touch when you're officially a Slovak. Luke Manajmeri 9231. My friend is living in Brno since last 3 months. He's unable to manage alone there and wants to call his family. Call family from India. That's definitely possible. I've done a lot of videos about that, about family reunification. We have a lot of articles about that as well. If you comment under this video when it's uploaded, I will be happy to share the links. It's just not the topic of this live stream. Sorry, your country, bro. Czech Republic, bro. And that's it for now for this topic. And I will now start a live stream in the joiners section. So if you have any questions about your application, for example, this one, like it's been 100 days, you've been waiting for your visa application to get approved and you want to get this answered, I'll be happy to do that. It's just now the open Q&As where you can ask me whatever you want are only for paying members. It's $8 a month, so nothing like too serious. You can cancel it anytime and you get 8 live streams a month with me where you can ask your questions. I'll be happy to answer them even if it's like half an hour just talking to you. So I will be going there right now in 2 minutes. See you there and also see you next time. Thursday, Monday, Thursday, Monday, until the end of the world.